So, a lot of people just assume that Stone Temple Pilots ripped off Pearl Jam, when in reality they actually had that sound in those songs, like, before Pearl Jam even formed. They had their Mighty Joe Young demos in the late 80s, and they had some of their songs off of Core, and they sounded pretty grungy, too. And, they're from San Diego, like Eddie Vedder is, so people even joke, like, if anything, Pearl Jam ripped off Stone Temple Pilots. But in reality, you can't just assume anyone is ripping off anyone unless they specifically say so. It doesn't matter what time period they come from. It doesn't matter how they sound, unless it's like blatant plagiarism, like exact notes or exact melody. You just simply don't know. And in reality, you can't be a true individual. You will always be a lot like other people. You can be different, but you can't be pure individual. So anything you write, chances are somebody else already wrote it. In a world of 7 billion people and so many more who have come and gone, it's just going to happen that way. But that's not a bad thing. I don't know why people just hog-tie this idea of in order to be good, you have to be purely individual. That's not going to happen. But that doesn't mean anyone ripped anyone off. And I think there's a lot of assumption made here. Anyone who came out in the early to mid 90s, anyone automatically assumes they must have ripped off grunge. You really don't know that. There are so many bands that didn't get the attention and praise that they deserved because they were just written off as ripping off grunge or riding its coattails. In reality, there's a few different reasons why someone may sound a bit like something but weren't just trying to jump on the bandwagon. Maybe they just happen to have the same influences, which some did. Bands like Silverchair and Bush, they just happen to have the same influences as Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and Alice in Chains and all those bands. They weren't ripping off those bands, they just had the same influences, so thus, of course, would sound sort of similar. Also, you may have just grown up in that time period, or, since that music was around, perhaps a band just happened to sound have it rub off a bit, but not be ripping it off. And then, of course, everyone wants to connect the dots with every band of every time, so they just try and find the similarities and act like, oh, this band ripped off this band. It's ridiculous. Another thing is, if they did happen to specifically go toward the grunge sound, it could just be because they like it better. Maybe they were starting off in one way and then grunge came and they were like, oh my god, this is amazing. So they did it because it's them. You really don't know. You can't assume. I'm just tired of this. This band was just jumping on the bandwagon. Unless they specifically said so, you just really don't know.